Next, economy. They said we're not unique. However, the Trump deficit spending from the spending flow proves that we are unique. The Trump deficit spending proves that we're going under. And then extend the -15 card that says that it was 4.3 times multiplier on the economy, meaning our internal link is so much higher than any other link in the entire debate. The economy is important, and the Royal 10 impact still stands. It's extremely important. Value it. Okay, solvency. Yes, STEM is growing. That's Rosen 13. It's in demand. STEM is growing. Instead, extend Rosen 13, which says that even if they don't, everyone doesn't go into STEM, it still extremely boosts the economy. In addition, they're in demand more than ever. That's Nick 17, Lee 16, and Lamb 17, all proving that there's not enough graduates in the STEM field. And again, they prefer ours due to recency and specificity. Next, the answer to Burke 11, that funding periods are back. This is literally evidence that states there's still a gap in STEM. The Burke 11 evidence just gives one program as an example, but the funding to Title IV is creating more STEM specialized schools, and last of all, Title II funding is key to improving teacher salaries. That's Plank 17. In addition, they said that they were not improving teacher salaries, but again, we solved the teacher problem by increasing teacher salaries by Title II funding. That's Plank 17, and Burke 11 evidence assumes the STEM shortage is still a problem, which we fulfill. That's Rosen 13 from the solvency. Counter plan. Extend the Andrews 15 coverage says that state innovations become national policy. So they say that state innovation is good, so they solve. However, if this is true, then it's still the perm solves better because it would still become a national policy. In addition, states are out of extend the Riley 17 coverage says that states are out of money. Who cares if they're funding STEM in the status quo? They're completely out of money. They can't pass the plan. The federal government is needed. The perm solves better because they can use the federal government's money and get the innovation, all the things that the negative team claims is superior to having the states. In addition, the federal is key to changing culture. That's a Clayton 10 card. We need federal action in order to change the culture within STEM. Next, on spending, they say that our McGinnis Card 17 proves their uniqueness. However, Trump is increasing spending by $54 billion, while the plan, that's in the McGinnis 17 evidence. However, the plan is only $1.6 billion. That's in Plank 17. So this is just a drop in the bucket. He's already increasing it by $54 billion. What the heck is another $1 billion going to do? They can't access this impact because they haven't given it a direct internal link threshold. And if they have, it would be so low that it doesn't even make sense because Obama added trillions and trillions of dollars to it, and we didn't see the impacts. In addition, they said spending is necessary. We said spending necessary to increase jobs. They said not deficit spending. But again, the FDR empirics proved that with the New Deal, we needed to do this in order to spur jobs and in order to spur economic growth. Next on the humanities. They say that STEM isn't increasing in the status quo. However, the SQUO STEM efforts under the CP proves that it is in the SQUO. The card they brought up on the CP proves this is wrong. In addition, they extend the Klivenkopf, the 15-minute card, which says that schools are solving the humanities trade-off in the status quo. Like the STEM schools are including humanities because they want students to have both. Just be proving that this is wrong. In addition, just taking STEM classes doesn't mean there's less humanities going against their Allen 16 card. And all of their cards just say that reducing humanities funding is the thing that triggers their impacts. We're not reducing humanity funding. We're just increasing STEM funding. The funding for humanities is still going to stay exactly the same, and these impacts will not be reached. And this means that the counter plan links more than the plan because the counter plan, the states would have to do it, and they're out of money, but the federal government doesn't. In addition, extend that democracy doesn't solve conflicts from Schwarzmantel 10. Obviously, there are still democratic nations that are in conflict right now, including Iran. North Korea is technically a democracy, and so is the Congo. These are all extreme. These are all in extreme horrible things are happening to them. In addition, they say that they turn warming because they need to switch the environment for STEM. However, the green movement is the reason that fossil fuels are used because clean tech is so expensive. We need more clean tech in order to make in order to make clean tech less expensive, and in order to solve for the warming. The status quo will do nothing to solve this, and you need to pass the plan. 158. Stein.
I think they forgot about this.
humanities, counterplan, spending.
I'm sorry, I missed the order. What did you say? No, I'm missing.
You're not Joe.
Oh, dang.
Yeah, seriously, Joe asked for it 3 times every speech. Every speech.
Wait, so what's the order again?
I'm just kidding.
It's a
You will
T.
make it faster than me.
I was joking. I didn't actually
Times
need
Q.
to.
T for Newsbury,
T for times Q. T for times Q.
Alright. What's the order? That was just a joke.
Don't-
Joke.
don't
That's
do
it.
that.
It's a joke.
Alright,
Joke.
everybody good? We'll concede that humanities solving the status quo. Taking STEM doesn't decrease anything. Cool. We're not going for this. Their term doesn't matter because taking STEM doesn't decrease anything, and so therefore they don't a link term. Cool. On to the counterplan. They talk about how state innovation actually equals national policy, but if you they've already considered if you cross by Lin 03 card talking about how too many influences, the perm actually links harder to it. Links harder to it because they're passing a federal policy, which means that the state innovation that percolates up doesn't happen because the federal policy already existed, and so no reason why they would pass another national policy after they already made that policy. That doesn't make sense. Even then, it still links to the perm still links to the net benefit. They made no analysis here because the spending that the STEM would have on the federal level would still exceed the federal deficit. I'll get to that more in a second. They talk about how states out of money, the federalism is Fed money is needed. That's the Ridley card, but there's no impact here, so it doesn't matter if the states are out of money. They're able to deficit spend without an impact. The spending dissent talks about the federal government deficit spending is what causes the impact, and so therefore there's no reason to evaluate. They talk about how federal is key to changing culture, but the MSDI17 card talks about how this crowds out state innovation. The state innovation actually causes the solvency because it's able to actually, from the 1 and C, that card, it talks about how being able to use state policies actually bring together random acts of STEM. That's the Robin 17 card, which talks about how specifically include South Carolina's Coalition for Mathematics and Science is one of the drivers of all these various coalitions. Is more principled what can we do in STEM education, talking about how by actually letting the states make this policy about STEM, it's able to actually increase the overall innovation and lead to separate policies that increase STEM for the entire nation, which means that the counterplan actually solves their case better than they do because of STEM education around the nation will be able to increase more jobs and will be able to increase more innovation and have a higher chance of solving for all these conflicts than actually they can. Cool. They entirely considered a lot of the analysis. The perm doesn't show the link to spending because it still equals spending from the federalism from the federal government. Still happens, which means deficit spending still triggers in the world of the perm, which means the spending decided is a net benefit. Cool. They didn't go for condo or 50 safety yet, so it doesn't matter. On to spending. They talk about how the spending is by $54 billion, but actually the reason why it matters is because let's go to the card that actually talks about the spending. They say that it's only $1 billion, but from the Catalina show like an Ackerman, it says science and technology are very expensive. But let's read it, how expensive. Let's read another one. Hillsborough pulled together 835,740 specifically for STEM. That's a single district that costs that much. So how much on the national level will it cost? It won't be 1.5 billion because of how many districts there are. So their analysis there is entirely false, meaning that the deficit spending that they're actually doing is like 1 billion times however many districts are in the U.S., meaning that the deficit spending that they're actually doing is not a drop in the bucket, it is literally the bucket. They talk about how FDR needed to spend in a deficit, FDR needed to spend in order to actually save it, but FDR spent when the economy was collapsing. If you cross-apply the MSDI17 card, which talks about how the economy is fine now, therefore we don't need to deficit, we cannot deficit spend because what that'll do is that'll not spur growth, instead that'll just collapse the economy because the federal government is going to more and more deficit spending, which we're already at 18 trillion, what it'll actually cause is it will cause the impacts that Royalton talks about how the STEM education, how expensive it is, makes the loans that actually that people give to the U.S. economy increase. The interest rates will go up, which means that the U.S. can no longer deficit spend because the U.S. is the central economy. If they start deficit spending, it doesn't matter how many jobs you create because that just increases the debt. Because this new jobs, this new infrastructure will again take more debt. Will again take more into the U.S. federal government deficit, which means that the collapse comes sooner if you federally spend. Cool. The MSDI17 card takes into effect the Trump budget into account, which means that it just proves brink. The counterclaim doesn't actually link harder because it's using the state spending, which they don't have a link to. California is running out of money. Was already answered because there's actually no impact there. It's not mentioning STEM. It's also more specific to California in general to link the STEM programs and the status quo.
Our evidence is focused more on STEM specific.
Our evidence is focused more specifically on STEM programs and the status quo, which means that you have to vote like state spending in the California area. The reason why you vote for us is because the counterclaim solves all of case better than they do because the state innovation, they link harder to spending than the counterclaim does. The spending is that benefit. Is there anything else?
And the perm fails.
And the perm fails. This spending, this economic collapse is what turns, this spending actually turns women.
133 starting.
I'm gonna go fill up the water bottle.
I'll wash your things. Trying to keep my computer from falling if it looks like it's going to. I will try. My bad.
Colton, if you want to look for it, he's like, well, it doesn't send that, just throw on air. I was like, that's just a little tech.
That?
There are a lot of
Just keep it.
There was like one potential line of questioning I can see in this round. We should check the future.
That's right.
And also, yeah.
I mean, if I have an Opta, she watched me.
Yeah, just wait for Brendan to stay. And I just go
Out of
through.
balance. I should read it again. I should read it
Brendan and
again.
Jaden.
Because the other two,
No, last, I hate.
In the round we just got it.
I don't feel like
either of us
were
particularly wrong.
No, it's because we
have
have
a lot more.
Yeah.
So like, you don't know what the judge should be doing the work.
yeah,
Brendan and Jaden picked up.
3-0.
Is everybody good?
no, we don't have
We still are missing a judge.
Wait, he takes and counts.
I am good though. Everyone that is here is good.
Wait, Lainey, did you say the other debate's already over?
Yeah, Brendan and Jaden picked up.
Hell no.
It was a 3-0.
Because they dropped politics in the 1 AR.
Well, that would do it.
That would do it. All right, Colton, are you ready? I know. Be quiet. Order's gonna be. Brendan. Order's gonna be.
Wait, I don't have Brendan down here.
It's gonna be Brendan.
I'm floating, Brendan. All right. Order's gonna be solvency, economy, spending, this state's counterplane, and maybe warming. Alright, is all good?
So, spending center plan. And, you want me to get that?
Don't make me you in the speech again.
Hey, it's actually worked really well, thanks Reese.
Like hard to hear from that.
We're jumping.
Alright, we ready now for real?
Yeah.
Once again.
First on
on solvency, there was a huge consensus that they didn't bring it up. We have 100% solvency of the advantages, which is going to be a huge problem when you come to the counterplan flow, because we have 100% solvency in the plan. So if I prove 99% solvency of the counterplan alone, that means that the perm solves better, or the plan alone solves better. Now into the economy flow. Again, there is a huge consensus because they don't bring up the economy flow. That is the nature in 2015 evidence, which is a huge internal link to the economy. It talks about how one STEM job leads to 4.3 other jobs, which is the biggest internal link to the economy within the round, which means that the spending dissad, the only people who do anything to improve the economy is the affirmative team. So that is the only way that you actually access any of the economic downturn impacts in the round, is by boosting the economy through the nature evidence. Now let's move on to the spending flow. So extend the fact that the McGinnis-17 evidence, which talks about how Trump's going to increase spending now. They see that factors into the budget are like the bank evidence takes into account, but he still is going to keep increasing spending in the future. That's what the evidence is talking about. It talks about like $54 billion in spending, which gives us uniqueness on the on the advantage. They don't even extend the uniqueness argument anyway. Now you got to extend the fact that the plan is like a drop in the bucket. The McGinnis-17 evidence talks about how he plans on increasing spending by $54 billion, and the plan is only $1.65 billion. That's the plan 17 evidence. Now they try to make an argument about how like one district cost about like $1 million, but they definitely don't do enough math to actually give you any substantive reason to vote on this argument, because they don't actually analyze how many districts there are and how much that would scale up. Prefer the Plankton 17 evidence for actual like federal warrants and how much that would cost from the federal government. They also say like FDR empirics don't actually apply because like it was spent while the economy was collapsing. That just gives us a greater blink on the that just gives us a greater argument, because FDR was doing hardcore federal deficit spending because the economy was in a collapse. Then they say like the evidence isn't STEM specific on the counterplan flow. I'll get there soon, but it doesn't really matter when we're talking about money now in the state's counterplan. The perm solves that's extremely Andrews evidence. Now they make a lot of arguments. They make a lot of arguments here. First of all, they do analysis on how the permutation still links to the spending it's had, but they don't actually answer Graham's only analysis, which was like really good because like it's the only thing they argue. But like it's good enough because the perm gets funding from both the federal government and the states. That increases the amount of federal funding that you are going to be getting net, which means that we have less of a link to the disadvantage, which means that we have the net benefit here. Furthermore, like the Andrews and 15 evidence talks about how like specifically like STEM. It talks specifically about STEM, how like the permutation and like federal like state policies percolate up to federal policies, which is why you do the permutation still. They say like the Lino 3 evidence talks about how like there's too many influences put in policy education and how that means that permutation doesn't solve, but that doesn't really account for the fact that the plan is only increasing funding, so the counterplan would be increasing funding as well, which doesn't really matter if there's policy influences because all of this is fiated. So that the permutation still allows better because it gets funding from both the federal government and the counterplan. And then also they like on the states have no money argument. The Riley in 2016 card you have to 17 card you have to extend that because like the states don't have the money. They say that they're able to deficit spend, but no, states literally have no money and deficit spending is like really bad. And the permutation still is a net benefit because it gets money from the federal government, so they don't have to deficit spend as much. And they say like states policies they extend the Roebelin in this evidence that says that state policies are key to changing the culture, but that was not actually extended in the block, so don't give them any access to that impact. And furthermore, I extend the Clayton 10 evidence over it and talking about how federal intervention in the state in federal funding to the state policies is going to access you the link is going to access that is going to access the culture change much better because they like make these arguments about how like culture means that we can't solve warming, but the problem is like federal intervention allows us to change that culture. Now let's move on to the warming flow. So on the warming flow, they actually completely drop the humanities like this ad, so that means that they can't access any of these arguments about how like humanities you need to change the culture within warming in order to access the impact. So first of all, stand the fact the tourism 2016 evidence that talks about how like there's a huge magnitude in global warming is going to cause extinction. It doesn't matter how long the time frame takes because the dissad isn't going to happen, even if it does, it's not going to lead to extinction, which the warming flow does. That outweighs everything on their everything on their flow. It also leads to like environmental authoritarianism and cause political instability, which means that causes nuclear war, which is Shepard in 2016 evidence, and how that leads to extinction as well. Again, the Green Tech movement solves all of these cultural arguments, which means that you need to prefer that. So overall, look at the spending. If you look at the spending code, the only internal link to the economy that's actually worth any weight is the nature in 2015 evidence because of the multiplier effect it has on the economy. Furthermore, extend the Lamb in 2016 evidence from the Lamb in 2017 evidence that talks about how STEM is overwhelmingly key to the economy, and the permutation completely solves way better on the counterplan. Way better on the counterplan because it gets spending from the federal government and from the state government, which is a net benefit. Also, we have 100% solvency on the plan alone. So if you believe that the permutation doesn't actually link as much to the disadvantage, that means that you have to vote on the permutation, which grants you at least less of a risk of a dissad. But the plan doesn't actually cause it anyway.